All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. All right, you ready to do it?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, so here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Marisa Michelson. Marisa, welcome.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
You are welcome. So Marisa is a singer and singing teacher, an award-winning composer, and the founding director of the embodied vocal performance ensemble Constellation Chor, which seeks wild embodiment through voice and body, and has made a name for itself performing at such venues as Lincoln Center and the Kitchen, among others. As a voice teacher, she has taught Broadway stars, opera singers, and people who've never sung before, but who know that singing is their birthright. Marisa recently completed a certificate in integrative somatic trauma healing from the Embody Lab, which is part of what has inspired her to be in direct conversation with therapists and somatic healers. With Constellation Chor, she's developed a practice for connecting to self and other via group, voice, and movement improvisation, a practice that she teaches to all humans, not just professional artists, and calls it core sounding. Marisa, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Sure. So I'm originally from Massachusetts, Western Mass, Amherst, Massachusetts. That's where I grew up. And then I lived in New York City for about 20 years. And then I moved upstate New York, near Hudson in Columbia County, about a year and a half ago. And that's where I'm talking to you from. And this is my real home. This is the home of my heart. Nature is all around, and it's beautiful. It's a wonderful place to get settled in the nervous system, and also to do the kind of body and singing work that I do, which is actually directly inspired by creatures, animals, the flow of water, the kind of movement of leaves in the breeze. And so moving upstate has been, beautifully opening for my path and the work that I do, and hugely supportive. And that's where I am now.
Awesome. All right. So I got an email from you about you, and I was like, wow, this sounds really, really interesting. So how the heck did you get into this? And what the heck do you do?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. Well, I guess I'll first just say that because this podcast is called, it's about trauma, and the work that I'm doing with singing is not for acute trauma, not specifically for people with PTSD. It's not in that acute phase, but something I have sensed for a long time in my work with students, people who are singing. And I also have worked with people struggling with addiction. And what I've sensed and seen over time is that doing this vocal work, because by its nature it's somatic, is when it's done right, by which I mean really present, when we're both really present with each other, then things arise to the surface that are stored and locked inside the person's body and naturally must be dealt with, whether it's let us together choose to put this aside for now, but we can still acknowledge that there's something here, or whether we decide to go in and work with it directly. So that didn't exactly answer your question. So I'll just go back and say that I'm a performer and a composer and the director of this ensemble. And I've been doing that forever. That was my path since I was a young person. For me, singing and music was always an expansive, kind of transcendent place to live that felt like it got me in touch with truths beyond what was just part of my five senses and helped me feel like a sense of belonging as a human in the universe. However, to make, a super long story short right now, because I was pursuing singing as a profession, and because of all of the pressures that come along with that, my journey with singing became one of shrinking and contracting rather than one of deepening into this natural birthright I had felt when I was a child. And so over time, I'm very lucky to have found an incredible, magical teacher in my early 20s who then set me on this path of singing that became not just my path of singing, but also a kind of life path, like a whole paradigm of how to see the world, and a way of being as a human that has now become my path. And I've shared it with other people as a teacher. And like I said, then started to notice the relationship between traumas locked in the body and how that shows up in our singing and our voices, which can be both the most vulnerable kind of areas of expression for a human, and also therefore the most potent, really, really revealing something that needs to be seen and felt and heard for someone to feel like their expression in the world can come to the next level.
Right. Interesting. All right. So, and I want to focus on that, but before we do, so you said you been singing from an early age and you were pursuing performing, but things kind of shifted, and you talk a little bit about what that shift was and what this new path was, if you could put it in a.
I love that question. I mean, yes, things shifted. They shifted in the sense that I was pursuing a more traditional path of being a performer who would go be in musicals, for example. And my path naturally shifted just as I grew in the world, and as I was moving along through my life in New York City to expand into being interested in more experimental music and body and movement and all these things. And meanwhile, I had won some awards for composing, and I was pursuing that, all of this professionally. But it's not like there was some sort of hard shift that I felt like, that's not good, I need something else. It's that the closer I got into the art that I was making and the path that I was pursuing, the more I could actually discover what my real interests were. And they continued to point me back towards my body. So the performer's body is their instrument. And as a composer, while my instrument for a long time was the piano, it was also my voice. And over time, I just became more and more interested in like, what lives here in my body and voice? Like, if there were nothing else for me, like if all the tools are taken away and here I am just as a human body, what can I explore here and what can I discover here? And then it became, and how can I do that with other people? And that's when I started to found this Constellation Chor group, where it was professional performers at the time, and it still is. I mean, that's still happening. It's still going well. There's still, performances and whatnot. But the central inquiry there is like, how do we be together with other humans, honoring our own bodies, connecting to our own bodies, and all of the traumas, challenges, pains, and joys that can arrive in that space when we're together. And so because that question became more and more important to me, that's when I just shifted my attention towards working with the ensemble and it's so fulfilling for me. It's almost like the same thing in a way. I was never interested in performing really for like acclaim or fame or anything. It was always like, what are these questions at the center of body, music, and being human? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. So talk to me specifically about when you started noticing traumas arise. And get specific. And what did you think? How did you respond, etc.?
Yeah. So without getting into details of it, the traumas in my body showed up very, very personally around breathing, around how I was breathing, or rather how I was not breathing, how I was holding my breath. And in, more traditional singing spaces, while there might be an emphasis on like, take in a deeper breath, lower your breath, that never worked for me. It never felt like I could actually either do it. My body didn't understand how to take a deeper breath. And it felt just like another direction from the outside of me trying to control and tell my body what to do, which became another kind of problem rather than a solution. And and how this would show up is I would hyperventilate a lot when I started working with my teacher, and the process of tuning into my body and singing became less about controlling and more about a practice of undoing and letting go. That's when all of this trauma could actually come more to light. Like that's when I started being able to see all of the areas that I was holding and tightening and forcing. And so like I started to say, that would show up in extreme hyperventilating during sessions, or I'd have to, stop, deal with it. And lots of physical pain. So I had chronic pain starting at a young age when I was a teenager. And again, there's a path of kind of ignoring that physical pain, which is the path I had been on, this path of controlling and doing. But in this path of undoing, it's like, okay, if I'm letting go, I actually have to feel this physical thing that's coming up for me. I can't will it away. And I have to allow it to be and, explore it. And the amazing, amazing thing about this work, and it took time, it's still going, goes forever, is that the realm of exploring these things that would come up, these physical ailments, or these like, or this hyperventilating, or this real tension in the breathing, or this incredible emotional weeping that would just come out of me once I started allowing. Like, the thing is that the exploration of these traumas was not in the realm of story or talking about it so much. Sometimes, yes, but really it was like staying with the energy and the feeling and going deeper and deeper into that in order to release it, or in order to watch it release itself. And that, to me, was and is, for me and for my students, incredibly healing, because we can get stuck in these loops of telling our story and talking about an emotion rather than actually being with the emotion.
Right. So, right. I mean, that's very much like somatic work.
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. So what you're talking about here, this sensing of the hyperventilating and so forth. Did you experience that early on in your singing career?
As soon as I started being in a space where I could soften my nervous system, like where my nervous system was invited into more of a parasympathetic dominant space, that's when all of this stuff could really arise to the surface. But the kind of like, so that's when the full-on hyperventilating would actually happen. But prior to that, it was still there. It was just that I had so much control over it, I could stop it. Almost. Yeah.
Okay. So you have these experiences, you begin to notice this. At what point do you say to yourself, I want to, or did you, I want to work with my students in this way? When does this become a thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was gradually a thing over time because it was what was naturally happening. Healing was naturally happening. People would come to me to be able to audition better and get cast in a Broadway show. But instead, I mean, sometimes they would get cast in a Broadway show. It wasn't like I ruined them or anything. But instead, what would happen became so much deeper and more fulfilling, which would be like incredible healing that people would start to share about getting to experience in this singing work that they weren't experiencing in even therapy, for example.
Okay, give me an example.
An example. Okay, so
we don't need names, obviously.
Yeah. So let's see. There's I have a student who had a lot of held trauma in their body because of an early death of a family member, let's say. So the way that this was stored in the body, very much like in somatic experiencing, was able to be felt by this student specifically because we were working with their body. So while, again, this goes back to what I was saying before about the realm of telling stories about something versus getting to kind of transform through the emotional expression of that thing. So this particular student who I'm thinking about over a year of time of being in a chair, softening their body, releasing their jaw in a certain way, which therefore will release the breath, because when the jaw is held, the breath is held. And what was held in the breath that was able to come out was so much grief. And the grief, as it would be expressed, had a way to transform eventually by being channeled into sound making and singing. And so that kind of creates an experience in the body of getting to feel what's there, be with it, and then instead of talking about it, actually turn it into something, you could call it art, but really just, I would call it expression. And to do that in a way that's productive because it's transformative. And so this is where I feel there's even a slight difference with somatic experiencing. In my experience, what I've seen is that and in fact, this kind of answers your question, because it's just in the last year that I officially, after doing this integrative somatic trauma therapy certificate, I've officially started kind of, outward facing, saying that I'm doing this work, not just for the purpose of singing well, but for the purpose of deeper aliveness and expression that is healing. And so when we use voice, because of the intimate relationship of voice to the breath, it allows these emotions to come more to the surface, closer to the surface, and to be expressed and transformed more deeply than, in my opinion, than even like movement or like in somatic experiencing. Like there is some sounding. It's amazing, what Peter Levine created, the VU sound, kind of like But the V sound is particularly focused on, a parasympathetic nervous state, like activating this deeper state. Whereas with singing work, you titrate it, but you can move between like a calming state and something that's very activating. And when you're ready for that, and when you can do that, then you get to experience like your full power and expression. And that in and of itself is so damn healing. I mean, getting to express fully
right.
as a human, I mean, it's for its own sake. A lot of people, I talk about emotions and expression as like mechanical, in a way that I find mechanical or like adaptive or like biological. I don't really see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as for its own sake, a part of us being human. It is beauty in and of itself to be able to move through this world as an expressive human being. That's who we're called to be. That's our birthright. And when we're missing that,
mm-hmm.
when we're not doing that, often there's a stuckness and a held backness.
And which is true for many of us, if not most of us. Yeah.
No,
right.
Trauma, not trauma, most of us. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
When you were talking about that example of that person who experienced grief, were you working with that person under the auspices of helping that person move through this, or was this like, come to me, I'm going to help you sing type thing, and this emerged?
Come to me, I'll help you sing. It turned out that this person had a fair amount of trauma associated with their singing path. But it was like, come to me, I'll help you sing. And then this is what's so amazing is that, like I said at the beginning, it's like, if we're honoring the body, which we must, if we're talking about authentic singing, because it comes from our body, or even authentic speaking, mm-hmm. If we're really present with and honoring the body, we're going to see what's there. And so, yes, they came to me for singing, and what we found was there when I would ask them to soften and let go, then what would arise right to the surface is this grief, for example. And that's, and then it has to be dealt with. And then it's like, how are we working with that? And what doesn't help is to say, oh no, that's not really, let's do that. Like, that's not singing, or, and that's not what we're doing here. It's like, if we're actually here to express, to sing, to be in our body, then we have to also be willing to be with what is in our body and what is coming up. Yeah.
It's first of all, you're a pretty amazing person. I just want to say that. And you're really inspiring. Mm-hmm. And it's just listening to you talk about the importance of, authenticity in the voice and expression and so forth is really resonating with me, because it's a lot of what I talk about on this podcast. And it's a lot of what a lot of therapists don't acknowledge initially, right? There's all this attention, a majority of attention focused on, we're going to learn this technique and that technique and that technique. Right. Having said that, when did you just realize from the get-go the importance of being present and being authentic as a singer, or was that something that unfolded for you?
It unfolded for me through my own painful process of feeling disconnected from my own body. And as far as how I could tell that I just knew. That was just causing me my own sense of grief. That was something that I could feel. Like, I was hyper vigilant for a lot of my early life. And I was so kind of self-aware of that hypervigilance that I would watch myself craft my expression on my face a certain way to hide what I was feeling. Or, I would feel myself hold my body a certain way to hide what was really happening inside of me. And that feeling of hiding, because it caused me so much physical pain, it was so uncomfortable. And I didn't know how to change it. And, that was just as a person in general walking through the world, but it came to a kind of clarity through singing, because singing is, first of all, it's about expressing. I was trying to express, and I felt in my body inauthentic doing so. I could feel my pushing. I could feel my people pleasing. I could feel my trying to prove something. I could feel my trying to impress people. I felt everything except present. I only felt, the kind of like what I want to be doing, how I want to be impressing and pleasing, the kind of voice I wish I had, along with the grief of noticing that, like the grief of noticing that I'm not here. I'm not really here. And it was hard at first to let go of that, because the process meant that I had to be willing to hear myself sound, quote unquote, not good. I had to hear myself sound like, weaker than I wanted to, not as strong and powerful. I had to face that if I let go of different physical holdings in my body, I might just cry for an hour, not sing. Mm-hmm. And I had to go through a whole process of understanding that is the only way to get to where I want to go, which is an authentic relationship with myself as an expressor in the world, and even just as a person in the world. And it's not like I walk around all the time now, just like, aha, I'm just totally, everything's authentic in every moment or anything like that. But for me, it was a real process of deepening into my body and gaining very specific tools for how to do that. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just at a most basic level, to notice like, oh, I'm talking to someone now out in the world, and I'm feeling like a kind of forward motion tension come into my back, and I'm tightening in my body, and to be able to feel that, and then invite myself to pause and give myself permission to actually slow down when I'm talking to someone. No need to impress or like prove a point about being alive. And that's not an idea that came from my mind. It's something that I became comfortable with over time of practicing, developing a relationship with my body where I'm listening and trusting, and then also taking action to give my body what it's asking for, to prioritize that over these other things that take us out of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Marisa Michelson. So who do you work with? Because we have a lot of, obviously, therapists of all kinds, survivors listening to this.
Yeah. I work right now, yes, I'm working with a number of therapists, people who have their own practices. Seems like, specifically somatic experiencing practitioners have been drawn to this work that I'm doing because it's similar, and yet I think is missing this vocal piece, like in a real deeper way. So a lot of somatic experiencing, but also just somatic therapists, people who are interested in more than just the talk therapy. Although both. Also, people who work with bodies, but haven't used voice in their experience, so like physical therapists, massage therapists, people who are doing different movement practices, often with their own clients, often in clinics with people who have trauma. Right. And yogis, people who are interested in breath work. I see it as, in some ways, for practitioners, for therapists, it's like supplemental, because like I said, I feel that there's this missing piece, this underutilized piece when it comes to voice and the power of voice. It's almost like it's so vulnerable and so fucking healing that it's like we forget, or we're afraid of it. And so I feel, grateful and excited that I can offer this piece to people who are doing such incredible work, healing work in the world.
Right.
And then also people who love to sing and want to sing, but have found themselves afraid of singing, or who have some sort of sense that their traumas will come up when they sing, and then they don't really have people to go to, because like I said, it's compartmentalized a lot. Right. And so these people end up, at least lately, coming to me because I can hold it. I can be with it. I've had experience with that.
And do you work one-on-one? Do you have online programs? How do people work with you?
Yeah, I have worked one-on-one, and I work one-on-one. I love it. It's deeply fulfilling. I'm doing a training myself this year with people who've worked with me for 10 years, even like a small group of a year-long training, like a kind of apprentice teacher training, because I can't work one-on-one with as many people as I want to.
Right.
And then I also have started doing group online courses. This past year, I did a few called Voice and the Nervous System, and I think I'll do one again this fall. And then I do in person, what I'm calling these core sounding workshops, which is what you read about earlier in the bio, which has to be live, and it has to be in person. And that's where, as a group, we're exploring voice and body, and how we take up space, how we make space for other people, and how we hold people's expression and encourage people's expression. And it ends up that in these nonverbal ways, people can express much more deeply than can happen with words. And so there are these in-person workshops, and I'm actually leaving tomorrow to teach the next one that I'm doing. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Marisa, as we wind down here, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
The best way is via my website, which is Marisa Michelson Vocal Studio.
Okay.
That's one S and one E in the last name. And then also I've been sharing and teaching on Instagram. So I think that's another good place. Okay. Yeah.
We'll have both of those linked up at the show notes here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Yeah, you are really inspiring person. And I haven't had anyone on the podcast, certainly, who's doing what I don't know if anyone else is doing what you're doing, but it's amazing. And it's so relevant to what we talk about here on the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. I would love to come back, and I'm writing a book about this. So, but I also wanted to say, Guy, that I would love to work with you if you'd be interested, play around, do some little practices, and show you kind of in the body what it is that I'm doing.
That would be cool.
Talking about stuff, it's not the same as the So
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, great.
All right, Marisa, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.